Guam is home to 168,000 people, the largest island in Micronesia, 3.5 hours by plane from Tokyo or Manila. A Spanish colony for over 200 years, it's been a U.S. territory since 1899 and was occupied by the Japanese for a few years. So as you can probably guess, baseball has been a big part of the island's sports culture over the past century. When the Americans arrived, they brought baseball with them, and the native Chamorro people took to it right away. It quickly became the favorite sport among Chamorro youth. Sometime between 1910 and 1920, a 6-team adult league was created. The American visitors, both military and civilian, made up the majority of the players, but there were also local native players integrated with these teams. In the 1920s, teams entirely made up of Chamorro players were beating teams of Americans. In 1927, 6 of the 9 All-Star selections were Chamorro players. The best team during this time was the Agana Cubs, a team of mostly native players. The other 5 teams represented the Navy, the Marines, and other groups within the military. The Guam Department of Education later put together a team that would become the biggest challenger to the Cubs' dominance in the 1930s. All games were played at Agana Baseball Field, in front of crowds of up to 5,000. This league, and organized baseball of any kind, disappeared with the arrival of Japanese forces in late 1941, though informal games sometimes played between teams of local players and teams of Japanese players. After the war, the league didn't reappear like you might imagine it would. Instead, the island's first youth league was created at this time, with villages competing against one another. In 1967, Guam Little League became chartered by Little League headquarters in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. In 2001, a team from Guam made its first appearance in the Little League World Series. They've made a total of 5 appearances now, with an overall record of 9-9. In 1968, the Guam Babe Ruth League was chartered, giving the island 2 youth baseball leagues. But while youth baseball was thriving, there was nowhere for these young athletes to continue with the game once they reached adulthood. So around this time, there were attempts to restart adult baseball. The island-wide baseball league was launched in the early 60s with military and local teams, just as there had been before. But unfortunately, it didn't last. The league folded in the early 70s. In 1974, Guam Major League grew up in its place, and it has continued to the present day. There were 6 teams originally. 1 team was the University of Guam, 1 represented a U.S. Navy ship, and the other 4 were local teams. All games were played at the old Paseo Stadium in Headick. The new league was a success right away. In the late 70s, with attendance rising rapidly for GML games, a decision was reached to construct a new ballpark of the same name at the same location. The old stadium was in poor condition and only seated 1,100 fans. The new Paseo Stadium was built with a capacity of 2,800. On May 12, 1987, 4,397 fans crammed into the stadium for Game 7 of the GML Championship Series, the largest crowd ever seen there. The venue has also been used for international baseball competitions, such as the Micronesian Games and Little League Regional Playoff Games. In the late 70s and early 80s, the 2 youth leagues in Guam were seeing record participation. In 1985, the Guam Amateur Baseball League was founded as a place to go for young adult ball players who did not make it into Guam Major League. In 1987, it was expanded to 20 teams, representing villages throughout the island. In 1988, they began playing 2 seasons a year. Baseball continued as the island's most popular sport well into the 90s, but during that time, youth participation numbers and GML attendance went on the decline. Before long, baseball was replaced by American football as the island's #1 sport, mirroring the trend on the U.S. mainland that had already occurred 2 decades earlier. In 2014, a survey was conducted where Guam residents were asked to name their favorite sport. 45.6% of respondents named American football as their favorite, while basketball was second with 34.2%. Baseball was third, only managing 13.9%. The real number probably isn't that low. 58% of those who took the survey were aged 18 to 25, and baseball would have certainly fared better if the older age groups were better represented. But there's no doubt that baseball's popularity in Guam is on the decline, at about the same rate as it is on the U.S. mainland. One reason for this is that Guam has a large U.S. military presence. The children of military and civilian workers bring their sporting interests with them, and in recent years the military presence has increased, so that effect will increase as well. In 1994, Keith Headick became the first player from Guam to play in the Major League system. He was a switch hitter that played second base and shortstop, but his playing days in North America were limited to that 1 season, split between Single-A Boise and the Arizona League. In 2006, his nephew, John Headick, also a switch-hitting infielder, became the first player from Guam to reach the Major League level, going 8 out of 24 for the Toronto Blue Jays and drawing 5 walks, good for a .448 on-base percentage. His numbers in AAA before and after that were good too, but for one reason or another he was never called up again. He played in the Major League system from 1999 to 2007 and played independent ball in Reno in 2008 before returning to Guam. Now 41, he's involved with the Blue Jays of Guam Major League, playing on the field at times, but valued mostly for his leadership and guidance. Another Major League player born in Guam is pitcher Sean Reed Foley. He is currently in his 4th Major League season, but he did not grow up in Guam. He was only born there while his father was stationed on the island. One reason we haven't seen more athletes from Guam exported to the Major League system could be their casual approach to the game. In a 2009 Wall Street Journal article, John Headick explains that young players in Guam have the talent, but they just don't play enough. They enjoy the game but don't see the point in practicing every day or playing year-round. In the same article, it says that high schools in Guam play a really short season, only 12 games a year, even though the weather is warm throughout the year. It's an old article, so maybe things have changed since then. But Headick went on to say that young people there aren't desperately trying to get off the island. It's not a poor or dangerous place. Most people prefer to stay there, close to their friends and family. That's part of the island's culture. So there's not a strong desire to spend your whole youth practicing hard every day so that you can go off to a faraway land and become a rich professional athlete. From 1982 to 1996, when baseball was at peak popularity, the Western Pacific Invitational Baseball Tournament was put on by Guam Major League. Teams from Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Hawaii, the Philippines, Palau, and China took part. One highlight of the event was in 1989 when China played against Chinese Taipei, years before that was actually allowed. In 1996, Guam won this tournament for the first time, but because of rising costs and decreasing revenue, the event was discontinued. The Guam national team is pretty strong considering its size, ranked 36th in the most recent WBSC World Rankings. They were the top climber from the previous rankings, moving up 16 places. Saipan and Palau are their historic international rivals. However, those two islands are much smaller than Guam, and the Guam national team would probably prefer to set its sights on knocking off a larger nation. The Philippines would be a good target for them, located just a few hours away and ranked only 4 places higher. Some good recent news. GML began its 2021 season in May after a canceled 2020 season, with 11 teams, more than they've ever had before. And another team will join next year. The University of Guam, one of the original members of GML, will be reintroducing its baseball program after a 20-year absence. They will compete in both GML and the Amateur Baseball League. They were supposed to come back in 2020, but COVID ruined their plans. Guam Major League games are played in the evenings on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and doubleheaders are played on Sundays. Admission is free for seniors and 12 and under, $2 for everyone else. All games are played at Paseo. Attendance is in the hundreds, no longer in the thousands like it used to be. Anyway, that's all for this one. Until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya.